So then we did that, and the more and more I did it, Bill, the better and better I became, because I learned how to center myself with that little buzz in the middle of my tongue.
A little device that they had connected to some probes that was sitting on your tongue, and when you leaned forward through the gyroscope on your head, it buzzed your tongue to say you're moving forward, and when you moved back, it buzzed your tongue at the back of your tongue, and when you moved to the left, it buzzed your tongue on the left, and when you moved to the right, it buzzed your tongue on the right. And that buzzing of the tongue left, right, backwards and forwards was enough to rewire your brain to use the tongue to replace the lost vestibular system, which was originally responsible for your balance.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to this milestone episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. This is episode 200. Now, first things first, thanks to everyone for liking, sharing, and commenting on my episodes, and those leaving a review on iTunes and on Spotify. And thanks to everyone tuning in and listening every week. All your interactions are making a huge difference to how the show is being found by other stroke survivors looking for this type of content. I started this podcast way back in 2015 under a different name, and it took a few years for me to get clear on who my audience was and who I was doing it for, and it was slow going at the beginning. I finally got some help and learned what I needed to learn to get better at recording and interviewing, editing and production, and I enlisted the help of someone that does the transcription work and posting of each episode every week, and without Lance, the show wouldn't have been as good as it is today, and there certainly wouldn't be as many episodes available. So a big shout out to Lance Garcia for all your help. It really means a lot. Thank you. Also, a huge thank you must go out to every guest that has said yes so far when a complete stranger from down under asks you to come on the show and share sometimes intimate details of your journey with the world about your stroke. You should be proud of yourselves, and you are making someone's life a little easier by doing so. And I hope that sharing your story has helped ease your burden of stroke a little as well. This show is being listened to in 66 countries and has over 5,000 downloads each month. It is a massive thing for me to be able to read that out to you, because it didn't start out that way. And it's because of all of you that the show has had the success that it's had. And it's because of you that I continue to put this show out. There clearly is a need, and I am very happy to fulfill that need. And hopefully this will inspire other people to get vocal about stroke recovery and make a massive difference to all the people in the stroke community who are looking for this kind of content and doing it difficult from time to time. Now, my guest today is Cheryl Shiltz, and Cheryl was the first person in the world to have her balance restored using neuroplasticity way back in the 1990s, when research in neuroplasticity was still in its infancy. What's unique about Cheryl is that her balance was restored by training her tongue to take over the role of the inner ear, which was obliterated by a medical intervention gone wrong, which left her with chronic vertigo for years before she became across the world-renowned neuroscientist Paul Bach-y-Rita and his team from the University of Madison, Wisconsin. This was such a fun and insightful episode, and you will see and hear how excited I was to have Cheryl on my show when it begins shortly, and you will hear how Cheryl's story played a key role in my own journey to learning how to walk again. Anyhow, enough from me for now. It's on with the show. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi, Bill.
Oh my gosh, I am so thrilled to be chatting with you.
Oh, same here. Same here. I'll be darned, huh?
I just cannot believe it. I'll tell you why I can't believe it. Because you're the kind of person who just comes up in a book or in a video, and you think that that person is not reachable, therefore, and you can't get to them, right? And you don't know what they're like and how they're going to respond. But the reason I'm so excited is because I was watching your videos with Paul Bach-y-Rita on YouTube when I was in rehabilitation, waiting for my first session to learn how to walk again.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's wow. Yeah, I can't even explain how how this all came about and how fortunate that I was to even be connected with Paul. And that happened actually through my my doctor, my Dr. Pyle, who I just found is retiring next week, because that's like such a great guy. But he was working with Paul in regards to the research. And so he told Paul, I think I have a good candidate for you for the balance, the sensory substitution. And I'm like, sure, what do I have to lose, right? Why don't I just do it? Because, yeah, I had to relearn how to walk. And learning how to do the sensory substitution also had a lot to do with the thinking process. But Bill, people ask me, how did I do it? And I think I did a discussion about resilience the other day. And what I figured out, I didn't have a lot of support throughout the whole process. And so I did all the stuff on my own. And I credit, I guess, the things that already had happened to me, prior life, and my mom, because she was super tenacious. And so what I think resilience is, and how this marries up with these things, is that every time you make a progress, it's like there's a little smidgen. And every time you keep going and going and going, I think that's how you build resilience.
I agree.
Because, yeah, and it's really hard to explain it to folks, but that's my ideas and thoughts of it. What do you think?
So I'm quite resilient, but I have days of being really negative.
Yeah.
And nobody who listens to the podcast or sees any of my comments sees that, because I'm not trying to hide it. I'm not trying to pretend that it doesn't happen. It just happens in very small bursts, and then I get over it and I move on. And a lot of what has helped me to get over it and move on is a lot of self-work, a lot of internal work, coaching, counseling with a psychologist, personal development courses, and then to a point, practicing what I preach and being authentic in that way, so that when I say something, I'm saying it from a place of having been there and having done that. And I wouldn't expect you to do something that I wouldn't do myself.
Right.
And when I got to 37 and had the stroke, the first one, I think I was quite resilient, but what was interfering and making it difficult for me to practice resilience was my stubbornness and my lack of willingness to try to solve problems in a different way. I was trying to solve problems the same way. And then that just eats away at your resilience, because that's the definition of insanity. And at the same time, you're going, how can I be resilient when I keep getting to the brick wall? I keep getting to the brick wall, not realizing that I am the one who's causing the same result, because I'm taking the same approach and I'm not going around the brick wall or over the brick wall or under the brick wall. So I think I was resilient, but then I didn't allow my resilience to shine through.
Yeah. Did you, but prior to that happening, were there like little steps of progress that perhaps you didn't recognize, that there were things happening? One of the things that I wrote in my book was that I got out of bed, right? Went downstairs, made the coffee. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, it's almost spring, checking things out. And all of a sudden I just got out of bed without sitting on the edge of it, wondering how in the world was I going to get through this day? Is it going to be another crappy day? And I sat there and I went, what other things have I missed, even if it's tiny little thing? And that's hard, I think, for a lot of individuals, maybe. My opinion is that they're not recognizable because you're so caught up and your head is so stuck into what happened. And it's hard to make that difference in I like thinking patterns, because we're always thinking about how we used to be able to do things, right? We didn't. All of a sudden, you're like this, and this is the great part. Nothing was wrong, and you're stuck here because you're scared to death to go over here. And what happened with me, Bill, was all of a sudden I recognized the little tiny things, right? And I went, you know what? All of those experiences, every single thing that happened to me is still me. It's still in me. So how can I take that and incorporate it with what I need to do now?
Yeah. To answer your question, yes, I definitely had a lot of success that I wasn't celebrating in overcoming myself and my challenges and all those things. And I wasn't aware that I needed to celebrate it. I wasn't aware that I needed to reflect and look back. I was just aware that something wasn't right and I needed to change something. So I did put a lot of time and effort into changing things. I just hadn't uncovered the one thing that I didn't know I needed to know, which was try a different approach. I know it sounds weird, but I hadn't gone there yet. I hadn't, the aha moment hadn't come to me. And, the ancient Greeks say, they say, know thyself. And I didn't know myself. I didn't really know. I had never done work that allows you to reflect on who you are, how you behave, how you identify, where you fit in the world, how you go about your life, how you go about the labels that you give yourself or other people give you. And as a result, I struggled to solve my problems. Now, when I had the stroke, and then I had the second stroke, is 6 weeks apart, very close together, I still hadn't changed. I was still the same guy. I was just experiencing these illnesses that were quite serious. And after the second one, I was very much out of my head. I couldn't connect with my head. I couldn't make decisions. It just wasn't online. It was like it was just switched off for a little moment. Quite a long moment, months. And then what happened was my heart came online. And I started to express myself via my heart. So emotionally, and from this more compassionate side of me. And as I was being more compassionate to others and appreciating the challenges that other people are facing, because now I was able to see life through this new lens of being unwell, I started to feel a little bit more compassion towards myself and realize how much I don't know myself and how much I'm lacking my own understanding. And then I just continued the personal development personal development sort of training in all different levels. And then I came to have an awareness that I was responsible for my own health, well-being, and recovery. And that didn't just start and end with the stroke. It needed to be an emotional recovery as well, a psychological recovery, and it needed to be a physical recovery. And then my whole world changed. Everything just started to appear as here's another solution, or here's another thing you can try, or here's a new person you can learn from, or here's a new teacher to teach you. And it's never ended, and it just keeps going and going. And a lot of it comes from me taking action in areas that I never had taken action before. And you and I are a classic example of now, the fact that we're together now and chatting. I never would have reached out to somebody that I saw on a video in a setting such as a book or anything like that. I never would have reached out to that person in the past because I had preconceived fears and ideas about how I'm not worthy enough or good enough to connect with that person, even though they're a normal person.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you did, because of, reading through your things and learning about what you do. And I've watched your videos and checked out all these things. And I'm like, some of the coach and the certifying stuff, I was blown away that it had things to do with neuroscience and positive psychology and all those things, because I love that kind of stuff. And I returned to college and got a degree in rehabilitation psychology. So, and that's working with individuals that have disabilities, and you try to help them through it and get back to work and whatnot. And the whole psychology stuff, I've been into that, I think, since I was a kid, not even knowing that I was. And so that really gave me I went back to school after that. But I truly don't know how this happened prior to getting involved in the research. And it took, that was the last thing on my mind. I was just, for probably 3 years, I'm like, are you kidding? I have to go from this spot to that spot, and I can't freaking walk in a way that I can't walk straight. I had to map out where I'm going to go. What can I touch? And so, all that stuff was constantly going through my head. And physical therapy was physical therapy, and it really, the one thing I remember is feel your feet. So in lines of coming up with your own type of thing, I developed my own kind of therapy, because we know our bodies and we know what works best as far as what's going to help us. So yeah, I pushed my way through a lot of those things, and then you start getting your aha moments, right?
Yeah.
Those little pieces that come to you.
Let me ask you a question, because we started this interview just with the premise that we're going to have a chat, but I think there's some gold in here. And if it's okay with you, do you mind if I share this as a podcast episode?
Wow, sure. Why not?
Right.
Why not?
Lovely.
I think things like this, Bill, is important for people to see, especially someone that has gone through something like we have, because there's this little bit of hope that I hope, and I'm sure you hope, helps somebody maybe have their own aha moment, recognize the things that they have done, because that's, I think, pardon me, is for healing. I think that is really, really important, obviously, to believe in yourself and to remember that you've always had these skills and you still do.
Yeah.
So how do you bundle it, you know?
Would you mind, now that we're going to share this with other people, sharing a little bit about the part of your story where Cheryl is perfectly fine one day and then something happens, you go and get some help from a doctor, and then that takes you down a completely different path, and then your life changes. Can you give me a bit of an insight into the lead up to what it was that made you seek out help in the first place?
Oh, okay, sure. I developed a post-operative infection really bad after having a hysterectomy, really bad. So I ended up in the hospital for 10 days on really high-powered antibiotics, one being gentamicin. So I was really on the edge of losing my life. That's how bad it was. And then I was released after the 10 days, given the antibiotics to administer to myself for another 7 days. So I was on this antibiotic for 7 days. And during the time I was on it, I started getting really sick and vomiting. My ears felt weird, like they had water in it. And finally, I was given anti-nausea kind of meds that give you horrible nightmares. But finally, I was able to stop and then went home. I spent time with my mom. And then I finally get home. It was a Sunday. I got up on a Wednesday and literally fell to the floor. I could not walk. I couldn't even like crawl. I thought to myself, it's like, is this what it's like when you're dead? Am I dead? You know? And so how to go from there, just to go to the bathroom. And I had to crawl to get there. And everything blurred and bounced with any movement of my body. And I mean, literally, if you were to take a video camera or your phone and put it on your chest and just walk around, that's what it looks like. So then, the whole process of, getting down the stairs, because that's where I left the phone. I had to bumble down on my butt downstairs and go through all of these things just getting to the phone. And my address book is in the kitchen. And it's like, who does that? So I had to crawl literally on my hands and knees, falling over, and finally got to the point where I could call a doctor. And of all things, I don't know why it did not occur to me to call 911. I drove myself to the doctor, and it's like a 45-mile drive. It was the stupidest thing. I did that 3 times. And finally, we're having some tests. Initially thought it was an ear infection, and I questioned that. I was on some pretty high-powered antibiotics. So they gave me meclizine, which is an like if you go on a cruise ship, those who get kind of sick.
Tablet.
Yeah. So finally we went to go see an ear, nose, and throat, and they did these tests, really weird tests, like cold and hot water and air. And I went, well, it's kind of weird. But finally what it was, it's, I'm sorry, Cheryl, but you have lost your vestibular system has been damaged, meaning it's just not working. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I had Googled it before I went to the doctor. That's where I got really, really pretty forceful that I need to do this, because I'm reading through this going, oh my gosh, it's every single symptom, every one of them. So I go to the doctor and we do these tests, and that's pretty much where my life as I knew it died. It just went away, died. And the doctor said to me, most people get used to it within 20 years. And I went, 20 years? And so I spent a good 3 years just trying to, I can't even say live with it, deal with it, because every single waking moment was of fear of all that was going on in my head was what I call it noise, constant noise. And, do I go here? What about this? What can I do? I can never do that again. And it's just like my life literally stopped as I knew it. So that is kind of the short version of, what, getting sick and having the damage done to now and what I had to do and, physical therapy. I don't know if your experience was like, can I just go outside and do this? Yeah.
Absolutely. I tell you what, there's a lot of similarities. So you said that you drove yourself to the hospital. That is so common. Stroke survivors, so many of us, including me, will be experiencing a stroke and make the decision to get in the car and drive to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
That's so common. And they afterwards on the interviews on the podcast, we know what's the wrong thing to do, but we didn't know then.
Right.
And that description of life just stopping completely is very familiar. That's exactly what it's like. Everything just gets put on hold, and then you remain in this holding pattern for quite some time, and then you're trying to discover the exit of this holding pattern. Is there a way out? How am I going to resume some kind of a life? So that's very common.
Right.
How did you get around for those 3 years, and what are the things that stopped for you? Did everything stop? Driving, working, every single thing stop? And how did you how did you move? How did you get to your appointments? How did you do anything?
Once I was diagnosed, I didn't have to go back anymore. Now this is what it's like for you. And like there were times that I just sat on the couch and sobbed. I was afraid to move because every time I moved, I had no sense of where I was in space. I had to constantly touch something, even if it was just my finger, because that gave me a grounding. As weird as that is, just to touch.
Orientation.
And yeah. And it was, every day was fearful. Every day I was afraid. And I just, and I am truly not a person like that at all. And so when that happened, I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to lose that part of me. So a lot of times I just made light of it. I didn't lose it. And I think that really helped with my recovery as well. So yeah, I got myself, I discovered the vocational division of vocational rehab. And so I went to them trying to figure out, because I had to quit the job of my life. God, I loved that job. And it would have given me a great retirement, all that stuff. I'd still be working with them. And just the best thing. So when I left that, I was devastated, absolutely devastated that I could no longer work. And so I tried here and there, and then it came to the realization that that's not going to happen and be in my life anymore, So the most difficult thing was to apply for Social Security disability. And man, that was just like, I don't want that. So then it's like, not only this, you got to go, how am I going to pay their bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And I don't even know how I got connected to DVR, but I got myself there and found out that I can get, financial aid to go back to college. I'm like, well, I've already been driving. So drove to getting my classes and getting like prereqs to go to the UW-Madison and then go after my other degree. And I did it. And it was during when I was at the tech school that I was connected with Paul Bach-y-Rita. And so yeah, laying out in my in the backyard, took my phone with me. I realized I'm always going to have my phone. That was before cell phones, right? And he told me about the research and he said, would you like to take part? And I'm like, what have I got to lose, right?
The inspiring part, and I know your intention was not to be inspirational, but the inspiring part is that you had no balance. You didn't know where your body existed in the world. You were fearful. Your life was completely changed and different, and it was out of your control. And yet you found a way somehow to push through all of that, overcome all those obstacles, and get to university and begin your studies again and learn something new and open new doors and see what happens. And in spite of all the junk that you had to live with and put up with, you still found a way to make it happen. And there you discover the solution to your problem. You just hadn't known about how much of a solution it would be yet. And you don't know anything about anyone who's at this place, but somehow you manage to attract or direct yourself to the exact place where the exact solution for you was.
Yeah, that still just really, it's like, wow, how did that happen? And I think you're right. It's just when something like this happens and it's difficult, but when you do these things and you get better, you do attract things to you. And wow, I mean, I just still can't believe I did what I did. Yeah. And I had to be very inventive because I couldn't wear a backpack with my books because it really messed me up. I couldn't carry it. And I was using a cane so that I can, sort of kind of get around, never walk in a straight line. But so I took like this little luggage carry. It's just a little tiny one. And I bungee corded my backpack to it. So I had that to drag and my cane. And it's just a matter of, I just got, what am I going to do here? I can't do it. So we come up with our own solutions. Mm-hmm. There's that extra level. That is something that I just did and recognized. So, during that time, I was just, okay, when Paul was talking about sensory substitution and that it's going to be this thing that's on my tongue and it gives a little buzz and it's going to help me with my balance. I mean, that was the thing that you got to be kidding me. How is that going to work? And so he explained sensory substitution to me, taking one sense to take over the sense that you lost. So, yeah, I was blown away to be in it. And it was just incredible to go through that whole process. Yeah. And working with the researchers, I became a co-investigator. So we all worked together on, how about this? Let's do that. And it was just the most incredible experience of my
So,
life. Just,
I love it. I love it. So
Mhm.
substituting, we're going to talk about that, like the substituting of the senses. One sense gets swapped or substituted or is used to achieve something else, like balance, right? We'll talk about it in a minute. But first I want to talk about Paul, because I've never met this guy. I've never met Paul. I've had the pleasure of meeting Michael Merzenich in person, and Michael Merzenich and Paul Bach-y-Rita were kind of connected in that Michael Merzenich is they call him the one of the godfathers of neuroplasticity, and I interviewed him for the podcast.
Yeah.
And he runs an organization called Posit Science, which does a lot of work around neuroplasticity and helping people overcome all sorts of challenges. And the person who I learned about Michael Merzenich from and Paul Bach-y-Rita from, and therefore you from, was Dr. Norman Doidge, who in The Brain's Way of Healing and in The Brain That Changes Itself speaks about your exploits and Paul's exploits and everybody's exploits. And it's just an amazing thing that in that book, there's so much richness of people who have overcome. Like there's examples of people who have overcome things they weren't meant to overcome, especially back in the day when you became unwell, which was in the late 80s, I believe.
This happened in 1997.
Ah, okay, 1997. Yeah. So
it's, I don't know how many years that is.
Yeah.
Don't make me do the math.
Don't worry about it. It was long. It was a long time ago. And it was before I knew I needed Paul Bach-y-Rita. It was before I knew I needed Michael Merzenich and Norman Doidge, and before I needed to know anything about stroke recovery. It was, when I was quite healthy and well. And anyhow, Paul Bach-y-Rita, according to Wikipedia, was an American neuroscientist whose most notable work was in the field of neuroplasticity. Bach-y-Rita was one of the first to seriously study the idea of neuroplasticity and to introduce sensory substitution as a tool to treat patients with neurological disorders. So you've met Paul. They were doing this crazy research. They were helping blind people see again. Okay. And then they said to you, because of one of the challenges that one of Paul's co-workers had with his balance due to an ear infection, briefly.
Right.
He kind of threw it out there and said to Paul, "What would we be able to swap the senses of the tongue and help somebody regain their balance with their tongue and learn how to balance with their tongue?" And Paul kind of just said, "Yeah, probably." And then they started to try and research that space. Now, how quickly after that did you become involved? Were you the first person to try putting that thing on your tongue, or was there other people before you?
I think there was like one person, but not as involved in getting it going and like let's do this. Now, when I first met Paul and Mitch and Yuri and Kurt, I got there and here I am sitting in front of a computer with a joystick and this thing on my tongue. And what I was supposed to do is using the sensations. I was supposed to take the joystick and going through this maze and seeing where I am. So to go forward, I'd feel the sensation go like this. If I had to go around the corner, I'd feel it going like this. If I was going down the stairs, it would pulsate and then it would come up if I have to go upstairs. And it was just fascinating to go through the maze. And so I did it. And so they're going to change the maze. And so I couldn't have any memory of it. And then they blindfolded me and said, "Okay, now you get how the sensation is. now let's see, excuse me, if you can do this blindfolded. And I did it.
Wow.
It happened, Bill. And it was like, that can help someone who is blind or some visual impairment see. It was fascinating. So then I was like, okay, sensory substitution, right? So it's like, okay, let's try this with balance problems. So we started out with 100, 200, and 300 seconds sitting down at the edge of the chair, my hands down, which was almost impossible for me to do, and with and without the device. So with it, it's like, okay, it took a while to get into it. And so it was a process. It took a while for me to actually get it and do it. And there was this box in a box. And my goal was to get that one box inside of the other box. And it was, at times it was really frustrating, but we had a lot of laughs on it. But finally, we were able to do it. And it ended up, took the ribbon from my mouth, and there was a residual, just a little bit, and more at the 100, 200, and 300 seconds. So we started going, this is indeed getting the sense of balance back into my brain using my tongue. And eventually we just kept going and going. And we're doing all these things sitting down. And one day Yuri and I work together, and I'm like, we should do this standing. It's like, we're not supposed to do the standing. I said, yeah, let's do it. And we did it. And oh my goodness. I mean, it worked, and it was just amazing that it had the residual, so I could stand there, eyes open, eyes closed. That's where the other thing that we had to do. And it worked. And the more and more I did it, the better and better and better. And we came up during some presentation with, what if she does it for 20 minutes? And we pulled we started it little by little, got up to 30, but when we discovered 20 minutes was kind of like the sweet spot.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So then we did that, and the more and more I did it, Bill, the better and better I became, because I learned how to center myself with that little buzz in the middle of my tongue.
A little device that they had connected to some probes that was sitting on your tongue, and when you leaned forward through the gyroscope on your head, it buzzed your tongue to say you're moving forward, and when you moved back, it buzzed your tongue at the back of your tongue, and when you moved to the left, it buzzed your tongue on the left, and when you moved to the right, it buzzed your tongue on the right. And that buzzing of the tongue left, right, backwards and forwards was enough to rewire your brain to use the tongue to replace the lost vestibular system, which was originally responsible for your balance.
Right. And when the movements occurred, it was actually what I had to do was bring the sensation back to the middle of my tongue.
Ah,
So, because that is, if I'm over here or whatever, I am not in balance.
yeah.
So, and it would throw me way off. So it's like, okay, bring it back to the center. At first I really overshot, but I had to learn to really focus on it.
Ah,
So it's that bringing myself back into a centered position and knowing to focus on it and focusing in a way that just almost like a meditative sort of state that the more I used it, the more that happened. So eventually using that sensation was just brought me more and more and more my life back. The thing that died, it came back to life in a much better, exciting way too. And kept doing that. Gosh, I used that for a good 2+ years. And came to the point where I didn't need to use it anymore. And I don't use it now. And I have to make a claim here is that I'm not healed. All this damage, all this stuff is still with me. I just learned how to deal with it. And I have crappy days. It was really rainy and yucky yesterday. So when the pressure goes down, then I'll have some difficulty. Uneven surfaces are, like really bad. I love hiking. So if you get on like rocks and whatever, I need a little extra help doing that. I try doing it myself. And the key, I thought for me, is just don't think about it. Don't think about it. Just do it. And sometimes I'll go really fast. Just don't think about it. Just, okay, there's a rock. And I'll stand and I'll map myself out and I'll go with it. And afterwards, it's kind of fun. It's like, I did it. Yeah. So
okay. That's interesting to hear that you also still have your bad days and that the damage done to the brain is still there. That's a damage that can't be restored, but you have bypassed it to an extent where you're still living a full life. And as a result of that, you just found again a way to continuously overcome, which is not think about it, or which is just speed up a little so that you're more. I'm not sure what speeding up does, but it's similar to riding a bike, isn't it? When you're going slow on the bike, you're more likely to be off balance. When you're going faster, somehow you become more balanced. And it's interesting that the barometric pressure influences how you're feeling on a particular day, because that's interesting, because a lot of stroke survivors will experience challenges on different weather days, depending on whether it's too hot or too cold. I certainly don't like the cold, and I notice when the weather gets colder that I struggle more, and my left side is a little less responsive and it's a little sleepier, and therefore my balance is affected a little more on those days. But again, it's people look at me and they think that I'm normal or look normal or quote unquote, there's nothing wrong with you, but they don't see the internal thing. The damage is still there. It wasn't removed. They removed the blood vessel and operated on my head, but whatever they left behind is still there. It's not going away. That part of the brain is no longer there. So, so that's interesting, because there's so many similarities that I can just recall of the interviews that I've done where people are describing what you're describing, and balance after stroke becomes a big challenge, whether that person has a challenge with their cerebellum, or whether the brain is impacted near the vestibular system, etc. And they're learning how to walk again. or whether they just had what I had, which is sensory impact to my left side. So it's the skin that can't sense where my leg is on the ground, and it's not getting enough feedback to transfer to the brain to tell the brain that, like your right leg, your left leg is in the same position but on the other side of your body. It's not doing that. It's going, right. There's something different about your left leg. We're not sure where it is, and it tenses the body on the right side, and it overcompensates, and then things get out of whack because I'm always trying to compensate for the loss of sensation on my left side. So it's fascinating. And, you know, I was so amazed by your story. As I said earlier, I was watching your video on YouTube, and then the grin on your face when you're riding the bike and you're being interviewed by some reporter. And I just thought, wow, I mean, look at this, anything is possible. I critically understood the importance of the inner ear and the balance that helps all people achieve. But, and I related to you when you couldn't stand up and balance and walk and do all those things. But I was so early on in my recovery, I couldn't yet relate to you being back on the bike. And I was thinking, wow, this could be a possibility for me. If I do this neuroplasticity stuff, which I just learned about, that might be something that I can get back. And that was the next part to my recovery. It was like, oh, okay, I'm going to walk, then I'm going to run, not marathons, but just run across the road or something like that. And then I'm going to get back on my bike.
Did you?
I did. I got back on my bike.
Terrific.
But I do have a bit of a challenge on the bike. So my left side gets tired more quickly than the right side. And therefore it fatigues quicker. My grip on my left hand loosens. And sometimes if I go over a bump, my hand will come off and I'll fall off and I'll do all these crazy things trying to stay up. And another time I was riding the bike into our central business district here in Melbourne, and there was a construction worker who said, the road's closed, don't come down this path. And I was, okay. So I stopped my bike and I went to put my foot on the ground, but my foot was so numb that I didn't realize that my foot was on the ground yet. And the bike fell over and it flipped over. And I just trashed myself in the middle of the central business district. So I had to solve the problem. And this is the amazing thing about the time of the world that we live in, the changes in technology and how much they support us. You were supported with this very basic version of technology that was leading edge, definitely leading edge, and it's still leading edge.
It is,
and it was ahead of its time. But I discovered e-bikes, electric bikes, which have a motor that supports the pedaling. Therefore, my left leg fatigues less. Therefore, I can ride longer and I can put my foot on the ground and I can come to a stop safely.
That's wonderful.
That's
wonderful.
So it's great. I remember...
We should say the name of the device. It's called the BrainPort.
Yes.
So it's, I think, well, if you go online and you the company that makes it is WICAB, WICAB, and if you Google them or BrainPort, you will find them, and then get some information from there. But you know, after all this stuff happened, you know, that's a big enough whammy, right? And then it was discovered I had a brain aneurysm. So, and it couldn't be coiled, so I had brain surgery, which was like, are you serious?
Wow.
You know? Yeah, so that was another, you know, great, here we go. And got that all fixed, and luckily and gratefully, I think I have there are things that, you know, that have taken a little stab, but then I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? And then I developed seizures. So now I have a seizure disorder, which is controlled by meds and all that. So each one of those things kind of like the first one was really crappy, and you know, you're being a 3-time stroke survivor, and so that first one is really bad, right? So then another thing happened, and then another thing happened, and I had to thinking, you know what, that first thing kind of gave, you know, showed the other one the ropes what to do, and then the other one. And you know, not to say it wasn't, you know, wow, was that scary to have that done. And there's a saying that I absolutely believe. It says, when air hits your brain, you're forever changed. And I just kind of think that's the whole vessel of your body. And when they open it, it just kind of goes. So we have a different body. We have a different brain from what it was. And, but I could see that you've done it and other people have done it, that it can be, we can do it. We can totally do it.
And that's the message, isn't it? That's the message. It's the people that are early on in our journey, in their journey, that's the message. Is your journey was quite advanced by the time I got to it in 2012 when I needed that information. You had been on that journey since 1997. So that's what I needed to see. I needed to see somebody who had progressed through the stages and come out the other side. And it didn't matter to me specifically, you know, how quote unquote good or bad the recovery was. I just needed to see progression and then be hopeful that there was a possibility for progression for me. And that's what we're doing now. We're giving the same hope to people who are going through the tough times right now, that there will be progress and that things will be better in the weeks and months and years to come. And you might not know how much better, but just keep moving forward like you, Cheryl. I mean, it's one blow after the next, but that resilience factor, I imagine, has still building and continues to build. And then when you get to the next one, it's not so foreign anymore. It's not ideal, and you'd wish that it never happened to you, but it's not foreign, and you have skills that you can draw on from previous experiences to get through the next one.
Yes, exactly. And, resilience never ends, Bill. Every day, something comes to us that we have to bust through. Even if it's like going to work and somebody is, going too slow, your car doesn't start, but you fix it, right? So we just learned a little resilience in regards to getting in my car and going. And that's a whole different type of scenario, but everybody has it. Every single person has resilience. It's just a matter of recognizing it and know that you have it. And everyone that may be listening and seeing that, yeah, you have it. I just want to share that we all have it. And that's how we get through. And it's not easy. It is not an easy job. And a friend of mine said to me, oh gosh, I don't want to forget this. Oh my goodness, it's a great killer statement. I'll think of it. It's just, gosh. Yeah, I know, it's really good too. we just, and it's different for everybody. I don't know how this happened other than paying attention. That's what I started doing, is paying attention to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Paying attention to how I'm recovering physically and psychologically, because those two are literally shaking hands all the time. And when something really traumatic happens, I think it's hard. They might not reach all the way. And wow, I'm just fortunate. I've just been really fortunate getting involved with these things. And I also became a warrior against the medication, because that's what did it. It was gentamicin. That antibiotic is the cause of my vestibular damage. So
would there be other people going through the vestibular issues that you had because of that medication?
There are quite a few of them. It can be, maybe a surgery, a head injury, but I think there's, my thought is, yeah, there are a lot of people that have this happen. And if I remember right, it was 3 or 6% of the individuals that take this medication develop vestibular dysfunction.
Wow.
So, which to me is way too many people. It doesn't mean like any kind of medication. When we're in the hospital, do we ask what we don't. And I think they need to tell you. It's just like when you go to the pharmacy, they give you this sheet and they tell you, what to look out for. And that doesn't happen in the hospital. So I really rallied on that. And I made a lot of noise, whether or not it's made any help, done anything. But, I got on the bandwagon and I just, something has to be done.
Fair enough.
And if I could, if it's okay that I tell my story about what happened to me in my book.
Yeah. Have you got a copy of the book there?
Wait a minute. Yeah. It's called Silencing the Noise of Disability.
Nice.
Remember when I talked about the noise? So this is telling my story from beginning to end to where I am now.
Yeah.
And it's available on Amazon, but
I'll put some links to it.
Oh, that would be, thank you. That'd be wonderful.
That's okay.
Yeah, it was a long time writing, I'll tell you. It was like years before, and then it finally all happened. But it's paying attention is a big thing. Using the device was one that helped that, but like that getting out of bed and not thinking about it and go, wow, I just did something really huge. Even though most people want to just get out of bed, but then it's like, you know what? There's more and more things that I found that I could do that were coming back, even if it was just like walking around the corner. And if I paid attention to that, I think we can see our recovery when we pay attention to it. And it's not just that we know, we see it.
Tell me if this sort of is kind of relates to it. Is it being active in our recovery? Because a lot of the recovery after stroke is passive. You go somewhere and they do something to you. Is that what you mean? Is it being active so that you're not only receiving passive assistance, you're participating in your recovery?
Yeah, we do have to participate, and being active is one of the things. And it was hard to be active because I'm like, I can't stand up. I can't walk a
Felt so
straight
unwell.
line. But after that getting out of bed thing, I went, wow, I'm going to start looking at what I'm doing and to be active. And I used to walk, I walked around my little town that we lived in, and it wasn't easy. I mean, I was all over the place, but I kept going and going, and because you have to do that. And I know it's so difficult, with anybody that is, had a stroke or whatever, to walk like that is so difficult. But it's even if it's just around the living room to the porch and back, and just to think, wow, I just took that step and I did good. Paying attention to how you really truly are getting better. You're just moving along to where you can, and you can take yourself there. It's not easy, but we can do that.
You have to do it in spite of the difficulty of being uncomfortable, right? The difficulty of, if I get up, I'm going to have dizziness, I'm going to feel unsafe, it's going to be scary, I might feel like throwing up, but I've got to do that anyway. I've got to get up anyway and go forward and achieve this thing in spite of the difficulty, the fear, the uncomfortability, I don't even know if that's a word, of consciously putting ourselves in a place that's hard and difficult. So it's like the guy jumping out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute. It's like the perfectly good airplane is perfectly good, but in spite of that, I'm going to jump out of this airplane into the wind, and I'm going to land because I'm going to get something out of it when I do that. And it's going to be hard and difficult and frightening and ridiculous and probably stupid and probably something we should never do. But I'm going to do it anyway because I've calculated the risks and the reward, and the reward is quite worth going after.
Right. One of the things I thought about, I don't know how much time, do we have time yet? Want to share that?
We
do. Good. The people around you not understanding, or like yourself, we don't look like we have anything wrong, right? Until we get up and walk. It's like, okay, now I'm getting up and people are looking at you, like, what's going on? And that was constantly like, oh my gosh, people are always looking at me and wondering. And I had to bust through that and just move through it. I started just smiling at people. I did a smiling experiment when I was on campus to see how people would relate to that. Not very many people smile anymore. And so that was hard because, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you getting special services at school? You can take a test in a quiet area, which I really hated doing because then that put attention to the fact that I have a disability. So I came up with another thing is just put earplugs in so I don't hear anybody. And
so you had a problem with over the stimulation of the brain with sound.
Yeah, because I couldn't concentrate. If I was having this conversation and other people were in the room having conversation, it's really hard to stay focused on you because I have all this stuff going on around me, right? So those are the little things. Not so little if it happens, but yeah, I had to come up with different ways. I worked with it's called disability resources, and at the college, so I was able to have somebody take some notes for me. I could take tests in another room, and I took my own notes, but only I could decipher it. But it took me like 3 times as much to learn what we're talking about, because I had to see the notes. I could use a tape recorder, and I had to read it and listen. All my senses were into reading that one lesson that eventually we're going to have a test on. So it it's not easy, but one of the things that I think is a very important for physicians, PT, anybody that helps us get better, to hopefully try to, recover in whatever way, is that I don't think people understand the inside of disability. And when I say that, Bill, is that we have this outer thing where we have, this is what's wrong, but we have this inside of us that is just screaming and struggling. And that is the part that is missing in services, in recovery.
I see the challenge, and we talk about this a lot, the invisible disability. It makes people like us who appear well and normal, for lack of a better word, makes us able to relate to people who are suffering from psychological challenges, depression or anxiety or other psychological issues, because we can now relate to them because they've had this challenge that nobody can see, and therefore they can't understand it unless they've had the condition. And the problem with your recovery is that doctors who have had, perhaps the people who have had what's happened to you haven't become doctors in that space to help people like them. And that's difficult for many reasons. And the people who have had stroke haven't gone back to being doctors on helping people recover from stroke because they are now struggling with their own challenges and issues that are stroke related, and they can't take up that type of a role in that space anymore. And that's the real difficult thing, isn't it? It's that whole idea that it would be great if they knew us better, but in order to know us better, they have to have had a stroke or vestibular challenges. And that means they have to be unwell. And how do we get unwell people to become doctors and spend so much time in doctoring and helping and nursing and studying and all that type of thing? It's so difficult. So we've got to deal with people who are ignorant but are well-meaning. They're trying their best to help out in this space. And then we've got to hope for angels like Paul Bach-y-Rita to be curious to the extent that he was, to come up with solutions to people that he doesn't understand, yet still come up with a solution for them. And that's the concept, is like a solutions-focused approach. But the medical system, the Western medical system, is not about solutions. It's about getting rid of symptoms.
Oh, there we go. There it is. They're not treating the inside of us.
Treating what we see on the outside. It's oh, you've cut your finger and it's bleeding and the bleeding is not stopping. Well, we'll just put a Band-Aid on that and that'll stop the bleeding. It's not looking beyond the layers of the skin to see what it is that's causing the bleed. Unless the Band-Aid is not managing to handle that bleed, we don't really care.
Right. And take it a step further is, things that have happened to us, there's a whole big bunch of stuff under that skin. you know, where we are and how we feel. And it's like we have to treat ourselves in that respect. And
Yeah.
it's really hard because we hurt inside. Disability and the things we've been through hurt.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes, a lot of times people don't understand. What do you mean hurt? I mean, I hurt because what happened to me literally stabbed me to my core.
Mm.
And that wound, I don't think ever heals. I think it kind of heals, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think, I mean, I still feel that stab
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just like, wow. You know, when I ended up with, you know, finding I had an aneurysm, I'm like, are you serious? What? They're going to crack my head open now? and you know, it's just, that was another one. It was just in a different place. It was that inside pain
Mm.
that is so, it hurts bad.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, you know, maybe all of our, you know, what I found is those steps to the little things, you know, that we're paying attention to, whatever, the pain starts to, you know, it's still there, but it starts getting, you know, quieter.
Mm.
And I called my whole thing as I was going through this the beast, you know, I just called him the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we're in, I was introduced to disability. Now, who the heck wants to be introduced to somebody like that, right? Because that's supposed to be for friends and new people, and you can get to know them, have some fun. And it's like, this guy is not fun. And little by little, I'm just like, you know what? I got to make him pick up my books and give me back my lunch money. You know, it came to the point where he needs to get to know me so then I can take control of it.
Yeah.
And we have that way to control it. And, you know, negative thoughts can turn it and have it lead to a positive thought. You
Yeah.
know, oh, I did this today. And if you feel really rotten, feel rotten. Let yourself feel that. I like I said, how many times did I sit there and cry? And, you know, I noticed one day, it's like, I know everything in my house and the placement. I can figure this out because it's familiar to me. I cleaned it how many times, you know? And so, you know, mapping myself, it worked, but it also was a way of saying to myself, you can relax now because you know you can get there. There's always things to touch, but I'm going to try to do it without doing it because I know where I am. I know my familiar spot.
Mm.
And how about you? Did you feel like that was the safest place for you to just be where you know?
It was, and it was a big motivation to come home from hospital to be in a familiar place. But then it also, I had the risk of it becoming a little bit of my jail cell as well, because I retreated to it often, and sometimes it would have been better to slay the beast and not go and retreat from it into my home. It would have been better to be out and going to that thing or trying that thing. But I think at the time, perhaps I was lacking the resilience at that time. Maybe I was just a bit low on, moral resilience, not moral, like like internal, like psychological resilience or mental resilience or emotional resilience. There was something lacking, and it was like, okay, safe place, retreat there, stay there, but then always venture out, always try and venture out, and try and make it easy for me to venture out, so that on the days that I really wanted to get to an event, for example, I made sure I had nothing else to do on that day, so that I wouldn't be tired by the time I had to get to that event and then miss out on the event that I so wanted to get to. So I had to really rediscover how to prepare myself to achieve the things that I really loved. And I've mentioned it in another couple of episodes, where one of the things I have a lot of, I value is being at home and preparing a meal for my family and eating together. So if it was my day to be at home and prepare a meal and eat together, I wanted to make sure that I had the energy to get that meal, to buy the ingredients, to bring them home, to prepare them, and to cook dinner and to have it ready when everyone was in the door at around 6 o'clock or whatever it was. So that day prior to that, if it meant I did nothing to get that done, then that's what I did. And it was a whole relearning about how to be me and still how to achieve the things that I loved, because missing out on the things that I loved too often then made me depressed and angry, made me feel like things were harder than they actually were, or that there was no solutions to my problems. So I had a really supportive family, but they didn't understand me. I had a really supportive group of friends, but they didn't get it. And I sought out other people who I didn't know, strangers, to guide me, counsel me, coach me, to pick up the skills that I was lacking, to evolve from this Neanderthal that I was at 37 up until my stroke. I was just a guy that pushed through pain barriers, fear, who let fear control him, who had one way to solve problems. Everything was a nail and all I had was a hammer, and I was just smacking and yelling and screaming and just reverting back to, this Neanderthal version of me was the only way that I knew how. And I had to go to places that were uncomfortable, like my heart, and discover what was lying there and let it speak to me, and then not be afraid to hear it and then take action on what it said. The reason why I think I was a bit of a Neanderthal is because I became a dad at 21. So my then girlfriend became pregnant. Then we got married, and 6 months later, my son was born. So I was just turned 22 when he was born. So I'm only 4 years out of high school, and you can imagine how lacking resources that 22-year-old person is. And in order to support my family, my wife and my son, well, the woman who later became my wife, in order to support them, I went and did the only thing I knew how to do, was work, and put myself last, and just worked and worked and worked and worked. 3 jobs at some point, anything to just keep them with a roof over their head, the bills paid, the heating on, all the usual stuff. So I took, when things settled down after, say, a decade of doing that, when I was, say, 32, I hadn't let go of those behaviors. They were useful for then, but I brought them into my 30s and beyond. And then at 37, I was still applying the same approach. This I've got to be the man, and I've got to feed my family, and I've got to pay the bills. And, and I had already done that. We were already well established and everything was fine, but I just didn't realize that I could let go of some of those behaviors and challenges and evolve and become a more upgraded version of myself. I had no idea. But then I was faced with such a tremendous loss of my abilities. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't implement those breakthrough barrier, work hard like a machine. I couldn't even do those things anymore So now they were stripped from me. Back then I thought it was a terrible thing, but in fact it was a blessing in disguise. And then I was able to find new skills that were scary and challenging and hard to learn. But as I found them and started to implement them, I started to get this sense of, wow, there's more solutions out there than I thought of. And perhaps beforehand, I was focusing on problems rather than solutions. Mm. And I don't know what my next stroke is going to cause, or the third one is going to cause, or even if they're going to happen. But if I'm focusing on solutions, I'm going to get way more solutions than problems.
Right.
And that was the mindset that dragged me out of being this Neanderthal to this more modern version of me. And I'm a very different person to what I was before. My personality was the same. If we interacted in a similar way, the same kind of passion and laughing at the same things. But underneath the hood was this very basic version, the first version of the Model T Ford motor that was great. But if we put that into a modern car, it wouldn't run all the electrics and all the things that need to run. And I got to chuck out that Model T motor, and I got to replace it with a more modern one and learn about what it could do. And what it can do is so phenomenal. It's so unbelievable what this new version of myself can do. This version of myself can create a podcast. This version of myself can create a course. It can coach people. This version of myself can write a book. This version of myself can do public speaking. And none of that was possible before 37 and before the first stroke. It was not possible.
That's fabulous. And that is a huge part of resilience.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you and I are very similar. The book started doing presentations, which I love doing it. And starting my website, I'm working on that. So it's all these kind of things that would have never happened if this didn't happen. And one of the things you said about solutions, were they self-made solutions, or you were thinking about, okay, I can do it this way and it'll help me better? Or
some of them were self-made. There were things that were obvious at the time, and some of them were things that, say I had a big problem and I needed a solution and I didn't even know that I had the problem. So you have to have this self-awareness of, there is a barrier in the way and you can't see it because you're the one that's creating it, when you're the person who's in your own way. And for those types of things, I did seek out coaching. So I went to counseling to work on the emotional recovery and the psychological recovery. I went to coaching to get me to solve the problems that I didn't know I needed to solve. And coaching was more about, these are the steps, follow this path, these are the steps, and let's check in and keep following the steps and keep checking in, and then reflect back in a year's time and see how far you've come and whether there's more problems to solve. So those problems to me weren't about, it was about how do I express myself? How do I connect with people from all around the world? How do I put my message out? How do I share other people's messages? And it was about the podcast mainly. And the reason it was important to do that was because my wife is, lovely as she is, she doesn't want to hear about me talking about my stroke recovery every minute of the day for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I hear you there. It's like I don't, I'm gonna just.
So I created the podcast to, out of selfish reasons. It was to meet other people and help me with my recovery, see if they could understand me and I understood them. And then, of course, when you're doing that, you realize actually that's helping the other person on the other side. And then it's helping the other people who are listening and their caregivers, and it's offering hope to all these people. And then I'm like, okay, all right. I think I found my life's purpose, my life's work, my passion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And before 37 and before the first stroke, no passion, no life's purpose, nothing was there. And I didn't know that I was going to uncover my life's purpose when I started down this journey. It started because I just took those first steps and didn't think about it like you on the path with the rocks. I didn't overthink it. I just did something, and this is what's emerged.
That's wonderful. And yeah, be really proud of yourself. That's really amazing. And you are making a big change. And I think that getting our messages out there, with my book, I thought, if I am touching one person, I will have been successful. And I think it's really important for us to be doing things like this, because what you've done is, when I was looking through some of this stuff, I'm like, wow, you've made a lot of changes in people's lives. And I've talked to people that just had no clue or idea that you can do this. You can think in a different way. And one of the things when I went to counseling as well, because you have all these thoughts and things that you didn't even know they existed, right? And so my counselor leaned into me and he says, Cheryl, you're still you. You're just in a different skin. That little sentence just put the light on. It's like, I am still me, and I am wearing a different skin, and I'm going to wear polka dots and stripes together and go out and have people love my outfit, and it was just that one thing that, okay, I may be different, and I'm going to wear something different, and I might even start a trend. Who knows? But I think that was my turning point, that I am going to do everything I can to spread some hope, because hope is huge. When you have that hope, that's healing. And I think resilience is out there. And and when people go through these things, I mean, it's significant. It is just a significant change in our lives. And how do we deal with that? Because we didn't have any of those thoughts or feelings physically, internally, externally. We just went about our day without thinking about it, right?
And we had no training either, no training to deal with these types of challenges. We just get thrown in the deep end, and you have to work it out, and it's, wow, how am I supposed to do that now?
How do you feel about everything that we've been conditioned, how our lives since our beginning, how we've been conditioned to be who we are, the relationships, what you were taught, what you learned, your experiences, and that big part of how we are conditioned through many different ways. And then this happens. The conditioning it's almost like that's the pathway, right? Because that's all we know. We don't know what's going on over here. I was just fearful as all get out about taking that step to get better, because I didn't know what I was stepping into.
Wow.
And
The
how
unknown. You're stepping into the unknown. And it's
absolutely
an unknown that can make your life better, but because you're afraid of it, you don't go to it. It's you getting in your own way. It's that whole thing. And what you said about the conditioning is I was conditioned to serve a purpose for somebody else all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I was at school, they tell you that they're teaching you so you can do a better job in the real world, so you can, make it in the real world. All that. But in fact, when I observed my children going through school, the purpose of teaching them was to get high grades so the school can advertise that to encourage more students to come to them. So even the kids became a resource to sell more spots at the school because it was a private school, rather than it becoming about giving the kids the skills they need to pass the subjects and learn the topics. It was about, if you don't perform, you're out of here. So we're not going to have somebody who's an underperformer in this school. That's like, you're meant to have underperformance at school. That's the whole purpose why schools were invented.
Going to school, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, are to embrace all of the differences and all of the things your child wants. If they want to do something really silly and they want to go pick up rocks and they want to do whatever it is that they want to do, respect that and encourage them to be their own authentic self. And we can do that as well, because we're kind of in school, but we are our own teachers. And so we don't have to worry about performing and getting all the grades and have somebody else have accolades for that because they did it. We are our teachers, and we can get good grades with whatever solutions we come up with, and just believing in yourself and knowing that, this really horrible thing happened to me, but I'm going to believe that tomorrow is going to be better. One of the things I also learned with the research and just basically, dealing with this and going through it, is to be in the moment. Because right now we are in moments. We're not thinking about this and we're not thinking about what was. We are in this moment, and every single moment leads to healing. Whatever little piece that it is. Just to be in the moment, because when you go, be present, because you don't know what's going to happen.
I found that when I was thinking too far in advance, that I would get anxious and worried and concerned, and that would change my whole physiology for the day, and I'd have a bad day in the present, And then when I was thinking about the past, what I've lost and what's happened and all the dramas and all the issues, again, you go into the past and you get depressed about that, and it's like you feel unable to influence it, and you can't influence it because it's the past, and you can't change it because it's the past, and it's happened, so you can't do anything about it. So what's the point of going there, in my mind? And that's also neuroplasticity. We're talking about neuroplasticity. It's like retraining the brain so that it's not doing those things that are not serving us about the past and what's going to happen in the future. That is perhaps some neural pathways that we've created and given time to previously, but they're not supportive of us in our recovery going forward. And if you want to recover going forward and have a full recovery, and you can get rid of some of those neural pathways about what happens in the past and what happens in the future, it's going to serve you better. It's going to create space for evolution and for growth and for recovery and for new opportunities and for knowing where to go for solutions just naturally without thinking about it like you did. Your whole recovery was, I'm just going to go somewhere and I'm not going to overthink it, and we'll see what comes. And what came was Paul Bach-y-Rita. And,
Yeah. Oh gosh.
you know,
When I was doing the the research, there was a point in time where I'm doing really well, and I said to Paul and Mitch, I said, you know what? And Yuri said, I'm going to go hiking. And they were like, no, you're not. I said, yeah, try to stop me. So I jump in my car and I drive to a place called Indian Lake. It has fabulous trails. And I used to go there all the time. And I missed it so much. Oh, I just missed it so much. And when I arrived, I just started crying that I'm there. And so I took my trails, right? I took my the path I would take and stop and say hello to my trees and just kept walking. And the one path, there's this beautiful old, I call him Grandfather Oak. And so he's there, and okay, I can do this, because that's where you take the turn and you go up the hill, and then you're in the woods and you're walking on these paths, and I'm like, no cane, no nothing. It's like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Even if I fall down, I am going to do this. You know, and there was like some pretty significant problems, but I stopped, regrouped, and I'm going to do this. And what I did, Bill, when I reached the end of that path, I knew I reached the end of my fear and all the stuff that made it, because that was the biggest day of my life. I knew I could do it, but I had to try it. And it was just, I can't even, I can't express how that felt. And it still gives me really good joy to think about that when I have a really crappy day or something happens. You know, I think back to things like that. I did it, and I can still do it because I did it.
Mm.
And
did you have a family when you were going through this? Were you going through it alone? What was your?
I had my son. Unfortunately in a relationship that wasn't very healthy, and hence not getting any help. But I had my son. He was in college, and so I was really pretty much on my own. You know, I had to still go grocery shop, and I had to still do all of these things because of, you know, the the situation. And I would see my family every so often, but it was just, I lived in an area where it was quite a distance from people. And so I had to do this stuff. And because of just the way it was, I had to do this. So there was no other thing. There's no other way to approach it.
And what do you think it would have, what kind of message do you think it would have sent to your son if you decided that it was all too hard and it was too tough and you were going to give in to your fear? What kind of message does it send to the people who are looking up to you, who are being guided by you in life and who are being taught life lessons when they're young? You know, it doesn't make for a good example when you're giving in to fear and your concerns and all that type of thing. And I wanted to be a good example for my boys when I was growing up about how you tackle a serious health issue, and then what the hell you do with it. Do you just let it there in the background? I had a health issue once and that was it. Or can you take the health issue and turn it into a podcast, a video, a course, a coaching, public speaking. What can you do with it? You can do all these things. So I wanted to really lay down the foundation for an example of what if my kids went through something like this, where could they look to for an example of how to get through it? Well, they could start at home first, and hopefully then if they had to go somewhere else, then they could find more people doing something similar that they relate to better. But initially, maybe I could just plant that seed in their head to say, oh, okay, the old man was unwell. He did this, he did that, he did that, he did that. And okay, there's a path, whatever. There's a path forward.
That is a really big thing. And bless your heart for doing that, because you just made a big difference with your kid, as well as my son. He saw me get better. And because I'm not going to lay on the couch and just, initially, and he was gone during a lot of it, but I was not going to put that persona on. I was not going to do that. And it was difficult for him because he did a lot of the caretaking, at the beginning, and that was hard. That was hard to do. He's an amazing man. I'm so proud of him. And but that's hard when you have your children having to take over. It's a whole different role. And so again, I did a lot of this on my own. And I think just I wish I could point and put a finger on it. And, perhaps, how can you put a finger on what it was that got you to where you are now, other than just working hard at it, changing our thought pattern, and just keep busting through it and get to become, you have a podcast, you have all of these things. And
I think it's and I don't know how it happened that I became this way, but it's being a glass half full kind of guy. It's being an optimist, an eternal optimist, in the face of absolute, toughness and difficulty and whatever. It's about being completely and totally optimistic that you're going to give me an inch, and that's all I need, and I'm going to take a mile. And I'm going to develop that and develop it and develop it and make it grow and grow and grow. And I'm going to continue, in the face of all the difficulties that are going to arise. I'm going to continue to be optimistic in spite of them. And I'm going to continue to look for solutions in spite of them. And I always had been that way. But I used to go to the wrong people to share my optimism with. And I used to seek out the wrong people to get advice from. And they would tell me that it's not possible, or something isn't doable, or you can't make money in that career or whatever. And then I would just feel completely disheartened. And then I would have to pick myself up again and put my socks and boots back on and just keep going down that path. And then I realized that I need to seek out the correct people to guide me and to have to be my ear, and to then have them give me the feedback that I needed to continuously encourage me, so that the God-given skill that I was given to be optimistic in the face of defeat all the time was going to be nourished and was going to be supported. And I think that's what it was. It's just this eternal optimist. And I'm not surrounded by them. I wasn't surrounded by them growing up.
Yeah.
And as a result, I felt like a bit of a black sheep. But I don't share with those people the things that are in my heart that they may tread on unknowingly, just because they're not eternally optimistic like I am.
Yeah. I completely understand where you're coming from too. It's within my family, I am the glass, half full as well, and it's a whole different dynamic in my family. So I just, I'm gonna keep going on. Like, give me an inch, I'm taking that mile. Exactly. And optimism is good. It's a good thing that we had it, because that's a part of where we are now. And I laughed through a lot of stuff. Humor just really helped. Just being, oh great, now I have to do this. Let's just laugh about it and see where it takes me. and oh gosh, it's it's such a pleasure to talk to you, because you get it, and to find people that get it is just really monumental, to be able to share this, and just, we know where we're coming from. So, with that said, you're helping me. I'm still having a positive person, somebody that gets it and will understand it and encourage and say, this is great. And meet a new person that is your ear. But it's more than that. There's this connection, because we know what happened to us, and we know how we got here, and now we're doing these things, and getting it out there and sharing it with people and helping people to really make their own path. And sometimes it takes a really big lawnmower to make your path, but you can make it any way you want. So
it's a beautiful analogy. And also, and the thing I get, the sense I get about you is you can see inside me, and that's not what many people can't. And that's the thing. That's where I get you. I can see inside you, so I know what you're feeling, or what you're thinking, how you're, how you're challenged, and because of my own similar experience, but also because I know how to look beyond the external and go deeper. And I'm prepared to go there, and I'm happy to go there. And when I say hello, I'm quite comfortable if you say, and I ask you, how are you? I'm quite comfortable if you say to me, well, I'm having a terrible day, and this went wrong, but I'm here regardless. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about that, instead of, oh, okay, see ya, I have to go now.
Right, I'm doing good. Yeah.
Like, most people,
if you're having this, if you feel like crying, just sit down and cry. Just let it happen, because it does have to come out. It has to. All of our emotions are coming out, and each one of those help us a little bit.
The best crying I did was live on stage when I'm delivering a presentation, and something triggered, and then the crying comes, and you can't stop it, and you're technically not meant to be crying on stage, but then you've got the crowd hooked. And
you too. That happened in mine last Tuesday. I did one, and it's like, even at the end, oh my gosh, when I said, thank you for being here, I really appreciate it, and I'm hoping that, and I just started crying. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like the last couple sentences, and you lose it. But it's okay, because being authentic.
Yeah.
When we're talking about something and we're so authentic, and it gets to us so good, and we're still, what happened to us, we're feeling it. because it's still really raw.
Mm-hmm.
It's really raw, and I don't think it really, like I said, it's wiggling around in there, and it's a part of us now, and we just need to tell it to go sit in the corner while we go and do our stuff. You stay back there. I danced with it for a while. It was in front of me, always beat me up and hit me and making me fall down. And then it's like, okay, little by little got to know it. So it's, at the side of me every once in a while, just for kicks and giggles for him, he'll push me. But then finally he's like behind me. And now technically it's kind of like it became friends with it. I know that's a weird way to say it, but I had to become friends with it in order to, yeah, you have to. And because that, for me, I just felt like the fight wasn't getting me anywhere. It's like I wasn't able to see that progress I made because that stupid beast keeps picking on me. So when you start doing this, you begin to say, I found that it's like, you know what? I am in control. You don't get to control me anymore. I am the one that controls this whole situation. So, you know what? Just away you go. Well, it doesn't like go all the way, but I'm putting you out for a while. You go sit out in the backyard or whatever, or in the corner. When I decide to let you out, I'll let you out. But and sometimes I think for me, I have to grieve with it every once in a while, and sit there and say, I know that this happened to me, and I just have to grieve with it because life changed literally in an instant. Stand up, get out of bed, stand up, and just literally fell to the floor. And there was nothing. There was absolutely a nothingness. It's like those movies where somebody is dropped somewhere and all you hear is wind. It's just a shh. That's all I felt like. Now I have to start building a whole brand new world. And as I progressed with that, Bill, I found out that I do get to build my own world, but the cool thing is I get to build it any way I want that's going to make it mine.
Wow.
And if I'm going to do a block here and decorate whatever the way I want to build the houses in my own house. I get to do whatever it is that I want to do. I can go tiptoe through tulips, anything. How I have learned, and perhaps you have, is like, I'm going to do anything, and I really don't care what people think that I'm about what I'm doing. It could be something just totally silly. And, I was at the zoo doing some photography the other day, and the lilacs were in bloom, and I just ran up to it and stuck my whole face in it to smell it. I didn't care what people were thinking. I just don't. Maybe I'll get somebody to laugh, but it's like, come here, try this out. Silly things like that.
Some of my crazy.
Yeah, I am kind of that way. So,
I love it. Well, that's me, similar. That's similar. Although it took a while for me to overcome the fear of doing the podcast and putting my voice out there and being judged and all that thing. And when I did do it at the beginning, I did get some negative comments immediately. I have no idea what it was about. And even now, when I look through my podcast reviews, there's some people who have left a 1-star review for the Recovery After Stroke podcast, believe it or not. I have no idea why. Clearly, it's got nothing to do with the podcast, or those people have tuned into the wrong show and they're confused. Clearly, it's got to do with some issue that they may have with me or whatever. But it did stop me for a little while, and then I kind of got over that and just overcame it. And I'm prepared to do anything to get awareness about stroke recovery out there. But there is one thing I won't do, which is not, I don't think is necessary to cross over into the stroke recovery. So I won't talk about political issues during the podcast that are not related to stroke recovery. And I won't talk about the war in Ukraine or my thoughts on this or my thoughts on that, because it's not relevant. So I will just keep it at talking about recovery from stroke and bringing on guests that are prepared to have that conversation. But you know, if the war was interfering with somebody's stroke recovery, I'll discuss it then.
Sure.
Like we did about the pandemic, which interfered in a lot of people's recoveries and rehabilitation and all that type of thing. And I did go to Christmas dinner one time with half my head shaved and the other half not shaved. So, you know, my pretty conservative, laid-back family all kind of like freaked out a little bit. What's he doing? Has he lost his mind? You know, so I tend to do those types of things. I bought some outfits that are the most loudest, most obnoxious outfits that I could possibly wear, just to test people's response when I'm feeling like having a laugh. And yeah, and it has been, and as a result of, I'm going to rewrite my journey, my book, and it's not going to be through the eyes of the vision or the eyes of somebody else. My own filter is going to be applied to it, and I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to reach out to strange people from the other side of the planet who put a weird thing on their tongue to learn how to walk again and get their balance back. Absolutely. You know? And I'm going to talk to them for an hour and 50 minutes. And
oh my.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And I just looked at that and thought, wow, I mean, that just goes to show you how much when we are with similar souls, or, you know, time just doesn't mean anything. It just goes away. And that's how you recharge your batteries and how you create more resilience and how you have an amazing rest of the day, and how that then goes into the next day. And then when I release this episode, people are going to go to me, my gosh, that was an amazing episode. And I reached out to Cheryl, they're going to say to me, and I checked out her YouTube video, and it just doesn't end. Like, it becomes this snowball effect of amazingness that just continues to happen. And all I had to do was reach out and have a chat.
Well, I'm glad you did. I am. I'm super glad that you did. And because this is definitely have a new friend.
Yeah. And do you consider yourself a pioneer of neuroplasticity research and that type of thing? Because you actually were. And now, because of you, 25 years later, Brainport Technologies, you know, YCAB Incorporated, has the Brainport Vision Pro, which wasn't really part of your solving your problem, but the Brainport Balance Plus, which is definitely related to the work that you did early on. Did you see yourself as kind of one of the people who really took neuroplasticity understanding and application to new levels?
I do, because as a group, we came through this, you know, as I was using the device, we all talked together about what could we do here? What could we do here? How about different applications? Who can we talk to? You know, obtaining funding and, you know, doing presentations and things that I was alongside with these individuals and with Mitch and Yer again. And yeah, we were all part of this. We were all together on it. And I do feel that way, but not in a like highfalutin way. Just in the fact that I was so fortunate to have had that happen to me. And I think that it was one of those things that was supposed to happen. It just manifested into myself. And, you know, being able to do what we do is one of the most, oh gosh, amazing, incredible, beautiful things that can ever come to us. And I can really now say, Bill, that what happened to me was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, look what I mean.
You just said, you just gave out the title of my book, my upcoming book.
Really?
Stroke, the unexpected way that a stroke became the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, that's is it out yet?
It's not out yet. 6 chapters are almost done, and I have another 4 to do. And the book, I caught myself saying that in an interview at episode 100 or something like that, somewhere near episode 100 or maybe 50 or something, I don't know where. And then I caught myself repeating that again down the track in another one and another one. And it's like, what's all this about? You know, how is that possible? And then I put it out on my Instagram, where there's about 4,000 followers at the moment. And I asked them, does anyone out there believe that stroke is the best thing that happened to them? And lo and behold, 10 or 12 people said, yep, they do. And I said, well, then I must interview you to find out how. How is that the case? And the book is the stories of those 10 to 12 people, and each chapter shares that story of that person and then goes into the 10 things that we had in common. That they didn't know they had in common with me, and I didn't know I had in common with them. But those 10 things came out in the interviews without me going there. They just said these 10 things in the interview, and each interview took about an hour to 2 hours. And then those 10 things, which I won't reveal now, I'll reveal one of them. One of them is mindset. One of them is mindset, and how they changed mindset and the kind of mindset they adopted. And then those 10 things became the chapters. And then we share a little bit of a little bit of scientific evidence to back up that idea and the topic of the chapter. And then we talk about, you know, how to apply it, and we talk about what to do if you're facing fear and you're facing some roadblocks and challenges towards applying that skill. And yeah, that's one of those things. It's just one of those things that came out of nowhere that I never expected, that is an amazing result of a terrible event.
Right. So not only is you know, you're coming together with other individuals that you can truly understand, you know, and not only the physical aspects, but the psychological stuff, the stuff that's going on inside, that it's so hard to communicate that to someone that has never had a significant traumatizing thing happen to them. I mean, we all, you know, everybody has some kind of trauma that goes on, and some kind of junk. But this one is, yeah, I mean, how do you, you just keep going.
That's it.
You know, you keep adding that inch to your mile, and yeah.
One day you look back and you go, look how far I've come.
Yeah, right. But not to forget that you got a lot more that you can do, and you have so much more that this world can give you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, where can people find out more about you, what's the website? And can we also talk about the book again, just briefly? And I'll have links as well, but just...
My website is in process. It's in construction. It will be CherylShiltz.com, and I'm calling it, Silencing the Noise.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be all based really a lot on my book, which is called Silencing the Noise of Disability, and one woman's journey of transformation, not to transformation, it's of transformation, because we never stop transforming. We're always going.
It's not a destination, so it's a journey.
It is the journey. That's what a journey. Oh, I don't even know the title of my own book. So that is available on Amazon. And it starts out, it's a story of me, from the beginning of when I was a child to the very going through all of this really junk. And, give a little information about who I was prior to this happening, and just going through the process of, if I would have put everything in, there would be like, War or Peace, which is like this. But, it's just short and sweet. Again, what happened to me became the best thing that ever happened to me, because I never would have been able to do that. And so it's very exciting to have that out. And I am working on number 2, so that'll come out. And but yeah, the website, when I get it done, Bill, I'll send you a link to it. It's not too far out. So a lot of stuff, there's all that work about, connecting and this and that, but I'll, when I get it done, I'll let you know. And I certainly hope this isn't our last conversation, because this has been way fun. What is it? Oh my gosh, it's been like 2 hours.
2 hours. 2 hours.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining me on today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. For me, talking to Cheryl didn't seem like it took 2 hours to get through this podcast interview, but time flew. We were having so much fun, and I really got a lot from speaking to somebody who is so passionate about making a difference to people experiencing all sorts of disability. And not only that, about how her story has inspired so many people. It actually made a massive difference to the research in neuroplasticity. She's considered to be patient 0 when it comes to sensory substitution and substituting one sense to another part of the body. And isn't it amazing that she was able to find herself in exactly the right place, in exactly the right time, when Paul Bach-y-Rita and his team were doing the research that was looking for and specifically needing somebody like Cheryl to prove that it was a viable thing, that neuroplasticity was viable and absolutely possible. And isn't it fantastic that she was able to get her quality of life back by substituting the job of the inner ear to the top of her tongue? If you've listened to this episode all the way through, what you need to do now is jump onto YouTube and do a Google search for Paul Bach-y-Rita to see the interview that was done with Cheryl and all the other things that the guys did together, that the team did together when they helped somebody who was blind see again. Also, if you want to find those links really easily, just go along to the show notes of this episode. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com. You'll find it on the homepage, or go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes, and you'll be able to find all of the links in the show notes to the things that I think you should see that are important to learn and understand, and maybe they'll make a difference in your own recovery. Now, please comment, like, share this episode. If you are watching on YouTube, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell to get updates of new episodes as they become available. The more interactions the episode has, the more the algorithm will push the episode out to people that need to see it, and the greater the impact the interviews will make. Thank you so much for being with me all the way to the 200th episode of the podcast. I couldn't do it without you. I really appreciate you for encouraging me to continue these interviews. It's made a massive difference in helping me in my own recovery, and I hope it's making a massive difference and helping you in yours.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.